Hello, everyone. I am Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. Perpetual Chess is a weekly interview show where top chess players, authors, content creators, and accomplished amateurs discuss their careers and share stories and chess improvement tips. Perpetual Chess is a part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, and we'd like to give special thanks to our presenting chess education sponsor, Chessable.com. For more information about the show, you can go to perpetualchesspod.com. But without further ado, let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We are joined by a stalwart of the American chess scene. He is a Tennessee-based grandmaster. He's been a top player in the U.S. for decades and is a four-time participant in the U.S. Championship. He also has a successful career outside of chess. He works in finance. I believe his current title is director in the fixed income department of TD Securities. Is that right, Alex? I forgot to check it with you.
That's right.
Okay. And to continue, he is Tennessee state champion. In 2018, he won the first senior tournament of state champions, which was modeled after the Denker Tournament of State Champions, which is a well-known tournament here in the U.S. that he was also the first winner of. He tied for second in the 2018 U.S. Open, and he is, as mentioned, the state champion of his new state of Tennessee. He's also an author, most recently, of the Exchange French Comes to Life, and he is a member of a three-generation chess family. His dad was a master-level chess player in the former Soviet Union, and his son, Mitch, is a USCF master. So we've got lots to talk about with our guest. Let's welcome Grandmaster Alex Fishbein to the show. Welcome, Alex.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to finally chat. We've chatted a little bit online, and your son gave me a bad beat in a tournament chess game a few years back.
Maybe a little lucky. I don't know.
Well, it's all part of the game, and he played a nice trick and then outplayed me in the end game. So well deserved as far as I'm concerned. And and you came by and took a look at it, although we didn't get a chance to chat much on that instance.
Yeah.
But anyway, Alex, like I said, lots to talk about because you've been so active. And if you don't mind, what I'd like to begin with is your recent tournaments. I know you just played in Tennessee, but if you don't mind, I'm even more interested in you and Mitch's trip to Norway. You played in the Norway Open in Stavanger. Could you tell us about that trip?
Yes, we did go there in, I guess it was early June. For me, it was a little bit special because I had actually played in Norway several times before, or maybe twice or three times before, and that was the town where I made my final Grandmaster norm back in 1991. It was end of 91, early 92. So that was one of my best tournaments. I scored, +5 in a small Swiss against a pretty strong field. And, I felt like it would be a good place. And I like Scandinavia to begin with. That's one of my favorite parts of the world. For Mitch, it was interesting because not only is it a trip abroad, but also he wanted to see, the Norway Chess A group the top group was going on at the same time. Magnus Carlsen was playing, Vachier was playing, MVL, a couple of other people that he knows very well. So it was just to see that, we got a chance to kind of go into the room where they play. It was not the same building, but it was right across the street, and to kind of watch that live. So that was a good experience as well.
Yeah.
We were trying to get a selfie with Carlsen, but weren't able to do that.
Understandable. I've seen some videos where he's walking in and out of tournaments, and it always just seems like he's swarmed by people. But
we probably could have done it if we really tried very hard, but I don't know.
But you mentioned it on Facebook. He did come and visit your playing hall at some point as well.
That was kind of funny. Yeah. I don't know who all the organizers there are and how well he knows all of them, but I'm sure there were different organizers in each section. And he just sort of came by to, we were in a different building, and he kind of came by to the area where not the area where the specific area where the games were, but kind of like the hallway outside to talk to somebody, I guess the organizers. But once his face, like once he showed up, the place kind of like stopped, and everybody just stopped thinking or playing, and everybody just looked at him as if he's some kind of nobody was thinking or playing while he was standing there.
And this is during tournament games?
Yeah. So, but he was spent like 5 or 10 minutes, and whatever.
Amazing.
I didn't. Yeah. So it was interesting. I mean, certainly. The trip was good. The results were kind of average, but we didn't finish very well. We started well, didn't finish as well as we could have, but both of us. But it was a great trip. good experience, and a little bit different feeling to play in Europe than here for many reasons, but it was a lot of fun.
So what was different about it? What struck you, Alex?
Well, first of all, they're very serious about preparation, I think even more than here. I mean, it could be partially because they didn't really know me. Here a lot of players already know who I am and know what openings I play, whereas they don't know me as well. So they're perhaps spending more time to prepare because of that. But I had a couple of people catch me in the opening like 16 moves deep.
Wow.
In variations that I had never played in games that were published in the database. So, which is very unusual here. Like they can look at my blitz games, I guess, in various places, but the level of preparation was really deep.
Is that where you think they found it, from your blitz games, or like how did they even do it?
Yeah, one of them I have no idea. The other, I might have played some blitz games in Title Tuesday or something. I don't know, but it's like the level of just the depth of preparation, trying to predict what I'm going to do. I didn't lose. I drew both of those games. They were against somewhat weaker players, but it was interesting. I actually, both of them asked for a postmortem after the game, which is also unusual. Here in America, you don't have that. There seem to be more postmortems. And then, they were telling me, they were pretty honest about it. Yeah, you play this line, which is no good. You play this line, which is no good. So I figured I'd do this, and it was definitely refreshing to see that.
And was it one game per day, or were there sometimes
one game per day? Except for one day, there was 2 games, but generally one game per day.
So that probably contributed to how much prep they did as well.
Sure, but I mean, I was doing prep also, but they were pretty intense, and it's a serious tournament. They take it seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, not to say we don't, but
And Grandmaster Jakob Aagaard's been vocal on Facebook about, he called it a tidal wave of Indian players traveling the world, young, talented, underrated Indian players in European tournaments in particular. Did you guys encounter that?
Well, Prag was the winner of the tournament. He was a top seed, Pragnananda. I wouldn't necessarily call him a young I mean, I don't know. He might be underrated, but he's already
known quantity.
Level.
Yeah,
known quantity. Yeah, he won the tournament. There were actually a couple of players not from India, but from other Asian countries like Uzbekistan, possibly, and maybe one other country somewhere there that were quite a bit underrated and were in the running for first place. So there's definitely a bunch of underrated kids from all over the world, everywhere.
Yeah.
This is a phenomenon we kind of observed in the U.S. already. And I was under the impression that the U.S. had the most underrated kids because a lot of tournaments here are not FIDE rated.
Yeah.
You see that everywhere in the world now. It's not just the U.S.
Yeah, my FIDE and USCF ratings have been moving in opposite directions because even if...
mine also. I mean, my FIDE rating has been moved down. You're playing, if you're playing against somebody who is 100 or 200 points underrated, that means you're basically losing 2 or 3 rating points right there, irrespective of the outcome of the game, because the effect will be 2 or 3 rating points on your result. So that's basically what's going on. And I think that to people who are facing that challenge, what I would say is, especially the older people who remember their ratings being higher in the past and might be inclined to become desperate or give up, God forbid, if their ratings go south or whatever. You have to be realistic. You have to look at the situation, and rating is just a number. Like looking at your strength and evaluating yourself by rating is not conducive to. It's not a healthy thing to do. You have to look at your whole performance, your overall tournament performances. How are you doing in the tournaments? Are you winning tournaments? There's a lot of underrated players with low ratings, but the tournaments are stronger. Players are stronger. How are your games comparing to the games you played 10 or 20 years ago? You can do that with an engine. You can look at your games with a computer. You can compare your games now to what they were then. And I think you'll find, you and probably a lot of other people will find, that your games are probably as good now or better than they were then, even though your rating might be lower.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And a little pep talk for the Levy Rosmans and the Ben Feingolds and the Magnus Carlsens. Everyone's retiring.
Well, we can talk about Magnus Carlsen.
Separate case.
Separate case. But of the, this, I do want to say that for me, I'm far from retiring. In fact, I'm probably playing more now than I ever did before, partially as a result of moving to Tennessee and working online, where I kind of have a schedule where I can travel more. But it's kind of like there's a lot of other people in my generation, and you've probably talked to them. You've probably had them here on the podcast. Most of them, like Patrick Wolff, Stuart Rachels, Ben Feingold. Ben Feingold still plays.
Well, he did say so he rage quit after the World Open. So
he's not going to quit. He's going to play. He still plays. I'm not putting him in that category. But Stuart, Patrick, maybe Alex Scherzer. I don't know if you know him.
I remember him. I haven't interviewed him.
Yeah, Ilya Gurevich. Maybe a little bit. Yeah, I mean, and some of the seniors, like a little bit older, who are playing in the senior championship, a lot of them are either playing only against other seniors or are not playing at all. And partly it's because they had a higher peak, right? So like Patrick Wolff, for example, I talked to him about this myself many years ago, and I think he probably might have told you the same thing, is he's already been U.S. champion. He's been U.S. champion twice. He was a very strong player. If he plays in tournaments, his level performance will be much lower than it was then. And so he doesn't have he doesn't feel like he doesn't feel the motivation. And I take a different viewpoint. Partially it's because perhaps my peak was not as high. I never became U.S. champion. I came close a couple of times. I was within a couple of games, but I didn't have that kind of top result. My peak FIDE rating was 2550, which is not that bad, but it's not as high as some of these guys. But you just have to set your goals differently. If you like the game, my goal is not necessarily to be at the same level where I was. Maybe I'll never be able to have the same rating or whatever. I mean, I hope to, but that's not really the goal. The goal is to play as well as I can, enjoy the game, and play well, play competitively even at an older age. Even if it means, there might be a mix of some good results and some bad results. Like, for example, I've had very good results in the last year where I was, playing at GM norm type level, right, 2600 level. I've had some not so good results. But, I think that for me, the pride is, I can come in, I'm 54 years old, I can still play as well or almost as well as I did in my youth. And I'm still active and I'm still doing it. I'm doing it against young players, not just people my age, but younger players who are not only underrated, but have more physical strength and energy. So it's a different challenge, but you gotta meet the challenges in life. So if you like the game, why not play? Just because you're a little bit, you're not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to conduct a whole tournament of 9 rounds without a loss, maybe. But you can still do the best you can, and you can still be a lot better than almost anybody else your age.
Yeah, I don't know if you're a sports fan, but I admire the athletes who were once stars, but who hang on and become role players, like Vince Carter in basketball or Pujols in baseball. Like, to me, that's an admirable trait, that you just love the game. So you say, okay, I had my time at the top, but I'm still here, and
right.
And to me, that's admirable. And we actually had a Patreon mailbag question along these lines from a friend and supporter of the podcast, Chris Wainscott. And you actually covered a lot of it about why you still play when some of your contemporaries, Chris also mentioned Fedorowicz and Dmitri Gurevich. I know Dmitri is your
Dmitri just played very well just now in the U.S. I don't know if you saw
you were
that,
just there, right? In Illinois.
I was not there.
Oh, you weren't there. This isn't...
No.
The U.S.
played
US
Illinois
Senior Championship, not the U.S. Senior Open.
Closed.
Sorry.
But closed, yeah. He tied for first.
Yeah.
With 5 people. It was a 5-way tie. So Dmitri is still good, but you just got to have the motivation. And he was motivated for this one. He prepared because I know him. We're friends. He was actually my coach for, I don't know if you know him.
Yeah, I did. Came up in your book.
He was my coach for like 30 years ago or 35 years ago. So I've known him for almost 40 years. So yeah, we talked. I mean, I know him, and he was motivated. He wanted to do well, and he did. And same thing in the U.S. Senior Open. Like, it's just a question. He's 66 years old, I think. it's a question almost. He's going to be 66 this year. It's a question of motivation. If you want to be, and he's playing very close to the level that he was when he was younger. I mean, I saw the games.
Right.
So, you can do that. And maybe there might be something to be said for people who are already have reached very high level before, like Patrick, like maybe Stuart, who kind of, don't want to show other people that they're not at that level. But that's, for me, there's more pride to showing people that I can compete.
It's good. Yeah. And also the fact that you play so much, I think helps. Like I think the hardest part would be when you first come back, even for players of that caliber. And the other half of Chris's question, which you touched on, but maybe you could expound on it a little bit more, is how you rework your goals as you compete in this new climate.
Well,
like, do you have explicit goals or not really?
I don't know that I can't say that I have explicit goals other than just to play well and do as well as possible in tournaments. You definitely come to play every game. You don't really think about ratings that much. You think more about tournament performances, first place, whatever. You try to play in the best tournaments you can. Conditions, for me personally, I find nowadays that it's important to have good conditions, meaning that, I don't have to walk very far to the tournament. It's in the same place where I'm staying. Like, there's no noise. The time control should be decent, things like that. Well-run tournament with bearings prepared. But as far as the goal, I think that, I always look at all the games that I play with an engine right after the game, and I analyze them. I just try to do the best I can in terms of the quality of play. Maybe if I don't really have a lot of students, but I've had a couple of students over the years. But if I did, that might be material for them. Mm-hmm. If you play an interesting game, you can show to your students. Maybe you find some things about chess that you didn't know before. Maybe you find something new in the opening, some new opening ideas. And I've come up with those myself in the last few years. You got to set your goals to be reasonable, to be something you can accomplish. You can't set your goals to be, something that's not going to be able to do.
Yeah, that's good advice, and something I'm constantly encouraging listeners to take it one goal at a time. One rung up the ladder at a time. And Alex, do you have any sort of more general advice about for older players still competing, whether it be about like managing energy or studying openings, whatever it might be?
Sure. I've thought about that a lot, actually. Well, everybody is different. Everybody is individually different. Everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. But, I've actually thought about that question. How do you improve it? Or how do you, I don't know if you can improve necessarily, but how do you stay at the same level at an older age? Like, a lot of times you have to just kind of to keep up. You have to run in place just to keep up.
Yeah,
right?
for
just
sure.
To stay. Yeah. And the person who has always been my kind of role model in that, as you could probably guess.
Do you want me to guess? My guess would be Shabalov.
Okay, a little bit higher up.
Vichy.
No, Viktor Korchnoi.
Of course. Okay. Yeah,
right?
I would have gotten it eventually.
Because he actually reached his peak at 47 or 48 years old. He got to that level where he hadn't been before. And how did he do that? And I was always thinking, I was trying to, when he died actually in 2016, because he was always one of my favorite players. I only had a chance to meet him once, but, I've always studied his games and his life and read all of his books many times. But when he died, I actually did a tremendous amount of work just on his games. And what I do, and this might be difficult for some people below a certain level, but I think anybody like above 2,000, 2,100 can do this, is I go to ChessBase and I use this thing called training mode.
Yeah,
I don't know if you're
like guess the move.
guess the move, right? Now, actually, Bruce Pandolfini has a column in Chess Life,
Solitaire
where
chess.
he does something very similar. In the old days, you would take a little book and you would kind of cover it with a paper, right? Cover the moves with the paper, play the move. But now you have ChessBase, you can do it with the computer. It closes the next move, right? So you just see the position, and you don't see the next move played, and then you play the move. You have a notebook, you have a kind of like a sheet of paper where you write down your move and your opponent's response, right? Your opponent is basically the opponent that, in this case, Korchnoi had in this game, right? I'm looking at lots of Korchnoi games, and I'm trying to guess his moves. And what that does is not only does it improve your level of play in terms of you're going to be forced to find moves. There's going to be a point you'll see once you see a position, be a point where you have to find the right move. And you might be surprised that you went into this position because maybe the previous move you didn't play the right move. You didn't get because you were afraid of something and you got to this position. Now you got to find it, right? So this is going to teach you how to find the critical point in the game and how to play the right move at the right point in the game. But also, and this is more subtle, and this might be only accessible to like the stronger players. So I apologize if that's going to be only for narrow audience there. But it teaches you about the style of the player. Because your moves, I'm a strong player too. And I'm going to make some moves, and my choice might be different than Korchnoi's. And in some cases, it might be better or worse. Just because I didn't play the move he played doesn't mean it's always a bad move. These days, you can look with an engine, right? Most of the time, it's probably worse, but there might be some times when, right? So, and there's a lot of times there are two equally good decisions. That happens a lot, or two fairly similar decisions. One that goes into one type of position or the other. So you can get a sense for how the player plays. So I did this with many of his games through many years of going back from like the 60s. He had a great tournament in 1968, Wake on Zay, when he won almost all the games. And then going through the 70s and late 70s, early 80s. And I detected what the changes were. So he changed his style considerably, and he did that several times. As he was getting older, he realized that some things were missing and he needed to backfill. So like in the 60s, he added endgame technique. In the 70s, this was interesting. This was to me the most interesting part, is from a player who was a technical player for the most part, strong endgame player, but technical player, not really an attacking player, more of a counterattacking player, but somebody who was a classically trained chess player. You see in the 1970s, late 70s and early 80s, you see basically a wild animal showing up at the board. You see a person who is constantly trying to complicate the position, even when he has the advantage, which is not what you're supposed to do. When you have the advantage, you have a technical advantage, you're supposed to just, like Karpov used to just kind of wait for the position to come to you, right? Wait for the opponent to make mistakes. He would actually force the complications. He would enter the complications, including in time trouble. And I think he did that intentionally because he wanted to remain sharp when he's older. And I think that's what worked for him. It doesn't mean it'll work for everybody, but that's what worked for him. He became a sharper player. He started looking for, more confrontation. It might also be that in his personal, situation with leaving the Soviet Union and everything and having the confrontation in life, it kind of like, spilled over to the chessboard. But that's what he did. And he became a better player as a result of that. And that to me was quite motivating, quite inspirational, because you can kind of figure out where you need to go and change your style. And I think he did that. In the early 80s, he played this match with Kasparov, the candidates match in 1983. And Kasparov had detected this because they'd also done a lot of work in preparing for him. And he noticed this because he wrote about this in his book. He noticed some of the changes, some of the fact that he was kind of like not really a classical player in the endgame. And so Kasparov said, you know what? I'm going to meet you head on in the endgame, because if you're going to be like that, I'm going to beat you at your game. I'm going to beat you in the endgame. And that's what he did in the match. And then as a result of that, Korchnoi changed again to become, as he became a little bit older, he wrote about the fact that it became more difficult for him to play after he turned 55 years old. So he started actually toning things down a little bit. He's especially against weaker players, he started using technique a lot more as opposed to complicating the position. So it kind of went in waves. It was very interesting.
Yes.
So, and when I look at my own games, if I see, I use that method a lot. This kind of the solitaire chess method in Bruce Pandolfini, with the training mode, right? I can do this with any player. I've done many players' games just to learn about how they play and just to. I mean, the other day I asked, and what I do is I'm lucky because I have Mitch, who is my son, as you know, he's a master. He is able to select games because you don't want to just do any game because the game might be a bad game where he makes mistakes. Like you don't want to be finding moves which are mistakes, right? You want to be going through only good games. So he selects games for me where the player basically makes mostly good moves, or he tells me which move to start from and what move to end with, something like that. Last week I did some Kramnik games. I've done a lot of different players over time. I've done Nepo games.
Kramnik changed his style too, and
yeah. I was doing Kramnik of the late, or I think early 2000s. Became more aggressive, but and I did some Nippon games, where he is a wild animal, also, of course.
Yeah,
very very sharp. Like somebody who just wants to go to the sharpest possible line. Is confident that he can beat the opponent there. Sometimes you need to do that in yourself. Sometimes you find that your play is becoming a little, calcified, so to speak. Maybe you're drawing too many games, or you're, not attacking as much as you should. Pick a player who attacks a lot. It doesn't have to be somebody from the past. It could be somebody from the present. Find some attacking games. Try to find those moves. That's what I do. It doesn't work for everybody, but that's a method that I use all the time.
Yeah.
At least it gets you one of the things about it is if you play that game, you're always going to win the game. Because the guy who wins the game, you're going to find the moves that win the game. So you're always going to get that good feeling about I found the combination.
Right.
Maybe I didn't find it in move 1, all right, but I found it, in move 5. After the first 5 moves I didn't find, but then the last 2 moves I did. You get some kind of satisfaction from that, from that, no matter what, even if you didn't. Like a lot of times you kind of exercise, if you don't solve the exercise, you start feeling down on yourself, right? In this case, you're going to be forced eventually to find the right move.
Excellent. Well, I've got 2 follow-ups for you based on that story,
yeah.
But first we need to take a quick break and
sure.
And hear from our sponsors. Listeners, as I record this, the chess world's attention is turned to the Chess Olympiad, one of my favorite tournaments of all, just tons of strong players all under one roof representing their countries. And if you are a Chessable Pro member, we've got good news for you. National Master Bryan Tillis is making a course based on the games of the Olympiad. I could tell you from past experience, there's tons and tons of tactics flowing from these games. You just have so many players playing each other, varying levels, that there's always lots to learn. And Bryan is an excellent teacher. So if you're not a pro member, you might want to take this opportunity to sign up to receive that and other perks. And if you are, be sure to grab it, as well as the other new courses that Chessable's dropping all the time, including a new one on the Triangle Slav from Christoph Selecki and Erwin Lamy, new courses from Judith Polgar, and the list goes on. So be sure to go to chessable.com and check out what is available both for free and for purchase. And Alex, as promised, this is fascinating stuff. So my first question relating to the story you just told, going back to Korchnoi, to studying the games of Korchnoi and having met Korchnoi, is there a story behind meeting Korchnoi? You hear so many.
Unfortunately, there isn't. So I did meet Korchnoi, but only once, and it was. I'll tell you when it was. It was. So my coach Dmitri Gurevich was actually his trainer for a while. So Dmitri was training him for about 5 or 6 years, I think. And he was training him during the 1988 Canada's matches in St. John, Canada. There was like 8 players. It was the old FIDE cycle. And I was playing in an open tournament there. There was big open tournament. I think Joel Benjamin won. There were actually 2 open tournaments. I think Benjamin won one of them, and I forget who won the other, but strong tournaments. There's also a World Blitz Championship held there. in 1988. And so I met Korchnoi. Dmitri invited me to one of their sessions in preparing for their next match game. He was playing against Johan Hjartarson, the match, Icelandic grandmaster.
Yeah, I interviewed him.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
A legend.
Yeah, he lost that match, Korchnoi did. But he was thinking about playing. We were preparing for the next game in which he was going to have black. He was going to play, I think, the Caro-Kann. But he also always, as you know, he always played the open Ruy Lopez. And I also was a big, I kind of, as a result of Korchnoi, I learned to play it. And that was a big, big favorite. I don't play it as much anymore. I sometimes still play it. But at that time, I played nothing but that. And I was a big expert in that opening. In the United States, probably the biggest. I don't think anybody else at that time played it in America. So, Dmitri thought it might not be a bad idea for me to kind of sit in on one of their sessions and maybe show Korchnoi some of the games that I had played in the Open Ruins. I played a game against Alonso Zapata. I played a couple of games against Yehuda Grunfeld, both GMs, at the time, strong GMs at that time. And Korchnoi played both of them as well. And, we kind of went over that. And I mean, I don't remember a lot, except one thing I remember is we were going over those openings, and then Dmitri at one point said, "Well, I mean, you're not really going to play the Open Ruy tomorrow because, where should we really be looking at it? I mean, you're not going to play it tomorrow. You're probably going to play the Caro-Kann." And then Korchnoi says, "Well, no, we're looking at the Open Ruy because I played all my life.
That's great.
I played all my life."
And
so he may not play it tomorrow.
Now, Alex, I know you're a grandmaster, very strong player in your own right, but were you intimidated showing your games to Korchnoi?
Probably. I was not a grandmaster yet. I was still I was actually, I wasn't even an IM. I'd had like 2 or 3 IM norms at the time. I wasn't even an IM yet. So of course I was a little bit.
I mean, I would be scared to show my game to any super GM. Obviously, I'm weaker, and that's part of it. But Korchnoi in particular, of course, well,
it was great just to sit in on the session. I mean, I was I was just quiet and kind of looking at their analysis. When I was asked to show something, I did, but I was mostly just sitting there and listening. I mean, he's quite a personality, of course. Right. It's incredible.
And Alex, the second follow-up was if you have made adjustments to your own game as you continue to compete into your 50s.
Well, I've done that several times. I constantly do that. I mean, I find that this goes back to, I was a student of Mark Dvoretsky, as you probably know. I studied with him for a while. And the method goes back to that. Like you find your weaknesses, you try to eliminate your weaknesses, but not lose your strengths, right? That's the goal, but it doesn't always work that way. But, you can go over your games, you can see what you've failed at and make patterns. So, yeah, I mean, I think recently there were times when I had suffered from like poor endgame technique for several times. And I kind of try to, catch up on that. I think I have tried to make my style, like following Korchnoi, I think I have tried to make my style a little more aggressive in the last few years. I started out, like when I was very young, I think I was a purely positional player. But then over time, I've become a little bit more, and then openings, I always try to come up with new openings. You have to grow. You have to play systems you haven't played for many reasons. One, you have to be unpredictable to your opponent. 2 is it just teaches you more about the horizon of things you can see in the game. So, whereas before I just played, mostly E4, I now play D4, C4. I play different things with white. I can play different openings.
But they were still able to catch you in Norway.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, I mean,
sometimes,
it happens. And hearing you discuss playing in your youth, Alex, I do want to dig into your chess origins a bit. I mean, I know you emigrated from St. Petersburg, and correct me if I'm wrong, you played chess already when you came to the United States?
Oh, yeah. So I studied chess in Leningrad. It was called Leningrad at the time. I was born in 1968. In 1975, I started attending what is called the Pioneer Palace. Yeah. You've probably heard of that, right? I'm sure you've had other guests who went there. And I was studying under Vladimir Zak, who you probably have also heard
yes,
of, right?
legend.
He was he was Korchnoi and Spassky's coach when they were little. He was also coach of Yermolinsky, Kamsky for a while, and a couple of other top GMs. And, I have nothing but great things to say about him. I think he was, there was an article, there's an essay about him in Sosonko's book. What was that book called? Russian Silhouettes, I think, right? You probably read that book.
Yeah, Sosonko's
and
amazing.
There was an essay about Zak. It was called The Great Teacher Inspires. And it's just, I don't think I could say it any better. He wasn't a great player. He didn't know endgames. He didn't teach endgames very well, for example. He didn't, he was not like a great attacking genius or expert. But you could just see that he loves the game. And for him, just the passion that he exhibited for the game, which is so obvious to the students. And you're left with that for life. So that's what he left me with, just the passion for the game. I think part of the reason why I'm still playing as much is because of that upbringing, right? I think, even though, as people became older and, stronger, like master level, it was not enough for them anymore. They needed to get a new coach. But I left when I was 11 years old. So at the time that I left, he was still my coach. And my rating at the time was about 1,800. So I came here in 1979. My first rating here was about 1,800. But I had a lot of the Soviet chess school in me already. I knew a lot of things. It was funny. We had adjournments. Games were adjourned every time. Our tournament games after 40 moves are always adjourned. So adjournment analysis was something I already knew a lot about, and that helped during the 1980s when there were a lot of adjournments. Here in U.S., I progressed pretty quickly. A couple of years, I was a master. At 14, I was a master, which at that time was pretty good. Now it's like if you're not a grandmaster by 14, you're a nobody.
Well, yeah, I was going to tell listeners even 1,800 at 11, that was pretty good at the time.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, so now it's like okay, or whatever.
Right.
Next, and then I actually kind of like stagnated for I don't know, stagnated is the right word, but kind of stayed in place for a while, for a couple of years. But then I met Dmitri. He started coaching me in 1984. At that point, I was 2,300, and I think with him, within a year, I think I was already 2,500. So, and then from there, it became tough. The getting from the IM level to the GM level, that involved a lot more serious work with dedication to the game. I had the Sanford Fellowship, so I had the opportunity to do that for a couple of years, take time off college and stuff. And I was lucky that I got tournament playing opportunities, and I got to train with Dvoretsky, as well as some other top trainers like Gregory Kaidanov.
Amazing,
for example.
Yeah. And
it was also lucky that the travels that I had, I got to meet a lot of top players at the time, and it was a little bit fortunate knowing the Russian language too, because for example, I could speak to a lot of Russians in their language much better than other Americans could, and I could learn from them.
But no real Russian accent, Alex. How'd you pull that off?
I don't know. I mean, I came here very young. I was 11 years old.
And I want to hear more about like your experiences with Dvoretsky in a second, but I'm also just from a human perspective, I'd like to hear a little more about your family's decision to come to the U.S. and how you processed it as like an 11-year-old boy.
Well, so we were, as an 11-year-old boy in the Soviet Union, well, let's say as a 10-year, 11-year-old, I was already knew that we were going. As a 10-year-old boy, when I first found out that we were coming, we were taught in school that America is a land of evil. Right. Yeah. And that any other country, anything outside of communism is a bad thing. So it was a shock initially. In fact, first I found out that my dad's sisters had emigrated to the United States. It was funny. My parents kept asking me, like, do you know where Aunt Rachel is one of them? Do you know where Aunt Rachel is? And I was like, no, She's in Odessa, right? That's where they live. No, she's not. I said, really? Okay. Did you know where she's? I said, no. And then at one point, like they felt I was ready to hear that. I said, they're actually in America. I said, and I was like, I didn't even say a word. Like it was totally shocking, right? So it took me a while to like get used to the fact that it's not like it is like they teach in the schools. By the time we emigrated, I was all in on that. I was no longer. I already knew that the Soviet Union was bad and America was good. It was kind of simple in my mind at that point.
But it's still got to be scary. I mean, you don't speak English at the time, Well,
I did speak a little English because I studied. Yeah, and that's part of why my accent is not as heavy as some of the other people who came at my age. I did learn English in school there from second grade, and my English teacher was very good. She was she taught us the right way to pronounce things, like where to put the tongue and things like that, which was very, very important.
Okay. And I saw that you were Wyoming state champion. Is that where you grew up, Alex? Or
I lived in Wyoming and in Colorado for various for most of that time. Okay. And so I did live in Wyoming for a few years and in Colorado. I went to college in Colorado.
And how did your family end up in those places?
So that aforementioned aunt, she moved to Denver. She lived there. She was in the real estate business. She didn't really have she made her business here. She was a business person. She doesn't really matter where she was. So she just chose a place where she thought the climate was the best. We came to Denver initially just as kind of, you have relatives here. And then my mom found a job in the oil industry in Casper, Wyoming, an oil company. So she lived there for about 20 years.
Okay.
Now she lives in Florida.
And
my parents are both alive and doing well.
Great. And Wyoming, not a chess hotbed. Not then.
No.
Not now. No. Now at least you have the internet. So how did you manage that as a kid?
I played a lot of tournaments in Denver,
in
Colorado, which was also not a chess hotbed, but it was at least something.
Right.
And given that I was only an expert, I had plenty of challenges there.
Okay.
In Wyoming, there was nobody. I mean, I had some friends, but there were nobody really challenged me there. But I didn't really, I didn't really improve to like a really strong level until I started traveling outside New York, East Coast, even abroad to play tournaments.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and what did you learn from Dvoretsky, Alex?
Well, so he was. He was basically. So there's a couple of things like learning how to self-improve, right? To improve your own game, learning from, make patterns of mistakes that you make, and then figuring out how to prevent those, looking at examples from other players and how they prevent those mistakes. Just as an example, for instance, he might say that, one of my problems is that he had a kind of a relatively simple way of looking at things, maybe a little too simplistic. He thought of chess players into two categories, intuitive and analytical. He thought that intuitive players have certain strengths and certain weaknesses, right? Analytical players have completely other strengths and weaknesses. He kind of put them into two buckets, right? Tal is an intuitive player. Karpov is an intuitive player. So Karpov and Tal are actually very similar, believe it or not. And people like Kasparov, Alekhine, Botvinnik are analytical players. So the intuitive players' weaknesses are they don't calculate variations very well. They can see through them. They can see variations very quickly, but they don't calculate. They can't calculate long variations precisely. Karpov can't, and Tal wasn't very good at it either, believe it or not. He was just good at like thinking very quickly, right? Not precise.
Yeah.
Whereas Kasparov doesn't have the intuition. He can calculate much better, but he doesn't have as good an intuitive sense of where the piece should be. He doesn't feel the critical point of the game as much. So that's kind of what the perspective that Dvoretsky came with. He thought that I was a more intuitive player, and he taught me, he was trying to teach me to kind of augment that intuition with ability to calculate, ability to think more more in a more disciplined way. He also felt that, at a certain point, like if you have an advantage, winning advantage, to actually win the game, you have to play you have to find some tactic at the end, because if an opponent just defends, you're not going to break through until you see some tactical continuation. And you thought that I was not very good at that, so he gave me some exercises to kind of cure that problem. Like to find the right time to kind of grab your opponent by the throat, find a tactic, just calculate one thing, and you're done. So, things like that. I mean, obviously a lot of endgame, I was already good at the endgame. So that was actually a strength already. But I think, calculation of variations helped, because I was probably, as a more intuitive player, I was probably less eager to kind of, to think very, very concretely. And maybe I was thinking a little bit too generally. So psychology, which, he talked about that a lot. Different. I can go into more detail in that.
Sure. Yeah.
But there's, and I think that, frankly, it wasn't just Dvoretsky. It was, communicating, and, when you just spend time with somebody really good, somebody, really talented, you learn a lot yourself. And I had the, I was lucky enough to meet, and to even study a little bit, or just go over some games with Michael Tal, for example.
Wow.
He was quite a personality.
Any stories?
A little bit with Vichy and not. Yeah. Well, so one story. So the first time I met him was in 1988. In the fall of 1988, there was a tournament in California, the American Open, and there was a. Yeah, so first, Dmitri, who was friends with him, he introduced me to him, and Dimitri's there. So Dmitri and I had played earlier that year in a game at the U.S. Open, which was published in the Informant. It was a nice game, which Dmitri won. He beat me. It was like a top board game, deciding game of the tournament. We were friends. We were good friends. We were staying in the same hotel room, but we were tied for first. We had to play each other. And he beat me. So he published the game in the Informant, and then he introduced me to Tal later and said, this is Alex Fishbein. He's my student. We actually played a game. And then Tal, okay, so he did not know that he was supposed to, that I was going to come and meet him. He had just like, it was random, right? Tal immediately remembered what that game was. So he had seen the game. Not only did he remember what the game was, he said something about that game. Yeah. So that game, it shows that the knight in c6 is as important as the knight in d6. And the game was an English opening hedgehog type variation, where the bishops were traded, the light squared bishops were traded, and the white knight came to c6 from d4. And that's like a big weakness, because black plays b6 and d6 in the hedgehog, right? And the c6 square becomes weak. The knight came into c6, his knight. I was up a pawn, but I lost the game because his knight was in c6. So Tal, like out of nowhere, just remembered the detail about that game. A game that he had nothing to do with. So that was pretty amazing. I thought.
Yeah.
It's like, what? And like ever since, the knight in c6 is as important as the knight, as good, as strong as the knight in d6. That's Tal said that.
So to be clear for listeners, he means a white knight, like a white outposted knight. Yeah.
The white knight.
Yeah.
It was just amazing that he let you remember. And then later in that tournament, it was another kind of funny story, which is I think is, well, not as much funny as I think instructive is. Because people don't think of Tal as a good endgame player. But I had an adjourned game. So in that tournament, I don't know if people realize now, computers used to play tournaments, okay, as competitors. So like Deep Thought, for example, that was one of the first computers, played in this tournament, okay? And you could, as a player, you could opt out. You could say, I don't want to play computer, like in the no computer list. I don't know if you remember this or not.
Now that you mention it, I didn't.
Right, there was like a no computer list which you sign up to. But I didn't sign up for that. I mean, well, whatever, I'll play computers, right? In 1987, I played a computer in that same tournament, High Tech, which was a precursor to Deep Thought. Yeah, I'm playing their High Tech since there's a big computer. It wasn't like a laptop or anything. There were no laptops. It was a big computer, probably occupying like easily like a couple of tables. And Hans Berliner himself, okay, was standing there operating the computer. Okay, it was pretty funny. That game was drawn. Then the next year, I don't think it was Hans Berliner anymore. Hans Berliner being the father of high tech, right? I think the Deep Thought was different. Was IBM's computer, I think, right? So Deep Thought played in so that was a precursor to Deep Blue. It played in the American Open. It won the tournament. It tied for first with Tony Miles, and it beat Ben Larson in that tournament. Beat Ben Larson, but lost to Brown. But it scored 6.5 out of 8 with Miles, and they tied for first. One of the games it won was against me, and that game was adjourned. Okay, so I had a adjourned game against the computer, and it was a rook and bishop versus rook ending. Okay, I had the rook, and I sealed a move, and my sealed move was a mistake. So if I seal the right move, then it's a draw. But I sealed the bad move, and now I'm losing. Okay, so and against the computer,
yeah, even then.
So I showed the position to Tal, and Tal like immediately there were no table bases or anything, right? We didn't have books showing how these positions are won at the time. We didn't have them in that room. But he just looks at the board and he says, this is Tal, who's supposed to be not the best endgame player in the world. He says, no, that was a mistake. Now you're losing. He showed me 3 methods of drawing. He knew them cold. He knew them absolutely cold. Like you wake him up at night and he knew them. 3 different methods. There's the method with the rook where you don't let the king go to the 5th rank. There's the 6th rank defense and there's the 7th rank defense. He knew all 3 of them and he showed me all 3 of those methods. You should have done this. This is a dead draw. You should have done this is a dead draw. What you did is losing, and the computer's going to show you how. I was just amazed. Like, wow. Really? You know this? Like, I thought you were just a combinational player.
Right. Well, it's funny too, because I feel like maybe this has gotten exaggerated possibly as the years go on. But of course he has this bohemian reputation, womanizer. In addition to obviously his insane chess.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit, yeah.
Did you have any outings with him? John Watson, who wrote your foreword, told a fun story of drinking with him on this podcast.
I was not drinking age yet, and I've never really been a drinker, although I do have stories about people being drunk during games with me.
Right.
But other people, not Tal. But no, I didn't really hang out with him that much. Once I asked him to go over a game that I'd played against Anthony Sadie, and he did. Spent like 2 hours. Also, this was toward the end of his career, right? Although that's not to say that he was not as earthly a person then as he was before. But I can't tell you that. I mean, I tried to spend more time with him, but he just, he didn't. I remember I called him. He was in New York during the 1990 World Championship match. I probably saw him at the ceremony or whatever, and then I called him and said, would you like to give me a lesson? I'd like to spend some time with you. He's like, yeah, I can't do it right now, but there'll be next time, I'm sure. But there wasn't next time. But he was still a great personality.
Wow.
Just an amazing person.
Yeah, amazing. And thank you for those great stories. And we've got more stories to hear from Alex, but we need to take one more break. And then I want to hear, Alex, about the Kasparov simul.
The Kasparov simul.
We'll be right back, listeners. Our friends at Aimchess.com continue to roll out new features all the time. Some of the latest include a training room where you can work on tactics, advantage capitalization, blunder prevention, tons of stuff. They've got their own analysis board. And of course, they still have my favorite feature, which enables you to do large scale review of your games and look for patterns that recur, review the mistakes that you've made in your games, set goals, and the list goes on. Aimchess is well worth checking out. And if you decide to subscribe, please use the code Perpetual30 or use the link in the show description to save 30% on aimchess.com. And we are back, and we have another question from a Patreon supporter of the podcast. And as Alex referred to, I interviewed his contemporary Grandmaster Patrick Wolff a couple years back, and we discussed this documentary that chronicles a match of 6 young, talented Americans playing against Kasparov, and Alex was one of them and drew that game. You can still find it find the documentary on YouTube. It's quite an interesting little slice of chess history. So I'll link to that in the show notes. But anyway, Sheldon Fernandez's question is, what was it like playing Kasparov as part of the American junior team simul in 1988, Alex?
Well, you have to realize I was not yet, as I said, this was during the time when it actually was just a few days after I met Korchnoi. So all these encounters with these people, right? Very intimidating, right? I mean, I was not yet an IM. And yeah, it was like sitting in front of him, just you get scared. And we in the opening, I was sitting next to Danny Edelman, we're all friends, obviously, but Danny Edelman, and we both had the same position. It was a Sveshnikov variation. He played this move, Queen A5 check against Knight D5, where you repeat the moves. And so Black actually invites White to make a draw. White can make a draw. And I was like, really? You're giving me a draw? And then I started thinking about it. I said, okay, well, I don't think I want to make a draw. I mean, I came here to play this guy. Doesn't look like I want to make a draw. I mean, I don't know. I'm White. I was just waiting because I didn't know the line. I didn't know how I was supposed to play there. I didn't know the theory at all. And Danny next to me is known as a theoretician. So I was waiting for him. Okay, you play first. I'll play when you play because you're probably going to figure it out. And he's sitting there waiting also. Like what do I do? Like I can make a draw. So he decides to make a draw. Gary gets really upset, which is not right. It was not right of him to do that. He's like, you should make a draw because and you can see that on the tape.
Yeah.
Because it's your only chance to play as world champion and so on. So, okay, well, after that, at least I can't accept it. I mean, I was actually, no, to be honest, I had already gone my way. I was like, okay, there's only so long I can wait. So I played my move. It was a bad move and I got a very bad position very quickly. By the time that he accepted a draw, it was already worse. But I managed to kind of stick it out. I gave him some problems during the game. And then I was worse most of the game. And then towards the end, I managed to just swindle him a little bit into a drawn ending. He had like 3 pawns for the piece, completely winning position. I looked at it after. It's like -6 or something. And I managed to kind of like trade. I traded my bishop for 2 pawns, so now I'm down a pawn. But it's a drawn rook and pawn ending. I was kind of surprised that he missed that because it seemed pretty obvious to me. But he was very upset. Like, okay, he had already won the match. He had won the match. The score was 3.5, 1.5. So this was the last game. So even if he loses the game, he wins the match. But drawing, he wins the match 4-2. Patrick Wolff beat him. A very nice game. Although he was also had to, come back from a worse position there. And then Edelman drew, and so I was the only other draw. He was not happy. I think in his mind, I don't know if this is fair to say, but I kind of like my approach, my style of play was at the time was very similar to Karpov. I always played Bishop E2 against every Sicilian. I preferred endgames, and I think having played all these matches with Karpov, had just finished a match with Karpov in Seville. I think he had some negative emotions facing somebody with that style again. So he was not during the next game he mentioned, Alex Fishbein, he's a good defending player. He defends well in positions. He doesn't really know how to attack. Played Bishop E2 against every Sicilian and so on. That's what he said after that. You know what? Those comments led me to change things. Like, I don't want world champion. Tal also said about me that he's not imaginative enough. Right? People saying that led me to change my style a little bit. Say, with these world champions are saying that, maybe I should start playing more aggressive openings. Maybe I should start playing more attacking chess, and that helped.
And have you encountered Kasparov again ever in the subsequent years, like personal interaction?
I don't think so. No, I don't think I have.
Yeah, great story though.
Yeah.
And Alex, I want to hear a little bit about your career because, as is I think especially common amongst your generation, you went to university and you've been playing all along, but you've had quite a successful career in finance. So, how could you walk us briefly through how that unfolded?
Sure. So actually, it's not unusual of people of my generation and my playing strength here in America, because you look at Patrick Wolff, he did pretty much the same thing. Stuart Rachels became a philosopher. I think Vivek Rao and Ilya Gurevich also both went into some kind of finance or some physics or something like that. The problem was, unlike now, in the early 90s, you couldn't make a living at chess. And we all went to college. At that time, I think, big difference between the previous generation, people like Fed and, Joel went to college, but people like Fed and maybe Larry Christensen, I don't think he went to college. People of that generation, that was a Fischer boom. So everybody thought if Bobby Fischer, who didn't even finish high school, can do this, then I can do it too. Everybody thought that way, and some of them succeeded. Some of them became very strong. Some of them didn't, but that's what people thought, and that's fine. But now in the 80s, that wasn't, people already realized that was a mistake, because these people, even those that became strong grandmasters like Larry Christensen or like, even Walter Brown, they had to kind of scrape out a living, right? And so people, my parents basically told me, you're not going to be, you got to go to college. Like, I know you're a good player and everything, but you got to have a degree, and then you can figure out what to do. Get a degree, and then you can decide what to do, right? So I got a degree, as did all of my peers, and I decided what to do. And I had a couple of years to make that decision. I was lucky because I had that Sanford Chess Fellowship. So I had a couple of years where they were paying my way, and I became a grandmaster, which is good. But I also got married, and that kind of made it more urgent, I think, to find real work, because you weren't going to make a decent living at chess to support a family, or even not to support a family, just to be on your own. It wasn't that easy. And, I had always enjoyed life. I wasn't somebody who was going to like scrape out, for me, lifestyle was important too. So it was an easy decision. I was a good player. I was rated, over 2,500 FIDE. I could have gone on. There's no question, if I had stayed in chess and if I had the resources to do that, I would have gone on probably to be at least 2,600 FIDE. But I went to work. I had a double degree in computer science, in math and computer science, and I went to work on Wall Street in a company called Kidder Peabody, which is a financial company, and basically I've been doing that kind of work ever since. It was kind of studying, analyzing financial instruments. There were mortgage-backed securities. I was working in that field, and I still do. I still work in that field for the last 30 years. But one thing I would say about that, and Patrick also went on to form a hedge fund later. In my work, I've done various things, from trading to research to client advice and to computer programming also, all of those things. But chess was always, like, at work, I'm still primarily known as a chess player. Mm-hmm. And it has always helped me because, unlike some of my peers at work, for example, I don't have an Ivy League degree. I don't have a PhD or a master's. I've never studied economics. I don't have a degree in economics or finance. But I think chess makes up for some of those, some of that, because people think that if you're a chess player, you're smart. And people think you're a chess player, you're a competitor. And I think that actually made a difference. One time it made a tangible difference. This was about 15 years ago, to 2004, so almost 20 years ago. I played in the U.S. Championship. I didn't win the tournament, but I won this thing called the Ben Larson Prize for the fighting chess. They had like a prize awarded to somebody who doesn't draw games, just plays to the end every game. And that tournament, I scored 5.5 out of 9, which was a decent score, but I only had one draw. And I won that prize, which is a pretty good prize, like $5,000 or something. And when I came back, my coworkers thought that because I won that Ben Larson Prize, that means I'm a more aggressive player than everybody else. So I'd be more aggressive. And they gave me kind of a promotion at work as a result of that. They gave me a trading job where I was asked to take on more risk as opposed to being more of an analyst.
That's funny.
And that's something I want to do, and that's something I went on to do for the next 15 years.
So worth more than $5,000.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that job it was a promotion. I wouldn't necessarily say that job earned me more money, but it was maybe it did, but that's not the most important thing. The important thing is it was something that was more interesting to do, and it's something I wanted to do.
Gotcha. And you do feel, Alex, like chess helped you get your foot in the door initially as well?
Well, initially, absolutely. In fact, without chess, I would never have gotten that job to begin with, because Peter Peabody. So actually, the head of research in that company was this guy named John Giannakopoulos. You probably don't know the name, but he was a chess player. He was like an expert, high expert, maybe even low master. He was around 2200 level chess player. He was participating in the U.S. Junior one year. He was probably he was relatively young. He was a professor at Yale, but he was in his early 30s, I think, at the time, maybe mid 30s. He was actually the head of that department, the research department. And so that's how I got the job, because my resume came across and they saw my name and they kind of knew who I was.
Gotcha. And and obviously, so what advice would you give to, obviously the landscape has changed, but still, nonetheless, if you're not an elite player, you're not going to be an actual someone who plays chess professionally. You can work in chess. You can be a streamer, a YouTuber, something like that, maybe work for a chess company, but you're not necessarily going to be just playing. So a young grandmaster, like I interviewed Michael Brown, who was going to university,
right.
Andrew Tang, who's down the road from me at Princeton. Like, what advice would you give?
He's still going to school?
What's that?
Andrew Tang's still going to school.
Right. Yeah. I think he's going to be a senior at Princeton.
Okay.
And he's doing an internship in finance.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. But what advice would you give to young, very accomplished chess players who probably are not, like, might peak at top 100 in the world if they devoted their lives to chess?
That's a tough one, because now it's different. It's very different now. And I think that given the same choice that I had now versus then, I might have chosen chess now, because you do have an opportunity to make a living, and a pretty decent living. It might not be what you want to do. Teaching is not necessarily what people want to do, but it is something that you can do. And chess is very valued in society now. It was then too, but I think it's an individual thing. I think it depends on your passion for the game. I think it depends on your goals. Like, are you going to be happy just being top 100? Or do you need to be top 10?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get to be top 10, you think your life is a wasted life. If you think that, then don't do it. Go to finance or go anywhere else, right? I don't know if finance is the place to be anymore. It could be other things. It could be whatever it is, right? It could be, technology, environment, but medicine maybe. But finance is not for everybody either also. But I think that now I think chess players have to think about it. It is a legitimate. I think it is a legitimate profession now, and I'm happy to say that. Even though I'm not really necessarily taking advantage of that right now, I'm happy that it's gotten to that point. And I think that grandmasters, they've gotten to a very high level. If you're talking about people at grandmaster level, I don't know. Feel like I would give it a shot.
All right. I like it.
I would give it a shot.
Yeah, that's good. That's
now more so than before.
Yeah. And similar to the advice your parents gave you.
Yeah.
Especially if you're like the people I named, were basically grandmasters at 18. So going to college,
right.
Like, you can do that and then do chess, like it's sort of a compromise. Although, although the value perhaps of a university degree is not quite as high.
Not as much anymore, no, of course.
As it once was. Last major topic for you, Alex, I think is your books. I've been speed reading your The Exchange French Comes to Life, and it's really got a unique style. I really enjoyed it. But first,
thank you.
Yeah, no, it was a pleasure to read. Obviously, I did the thing where I didn't have the chess set out, so I just looked at the diagrams and played through the moves in my head. But I greatly enjoyed the book.
Well, you shouldn't have to use a chess set these days.
No, yeah, this is
true.
That's
why there's put in diagrams.
But okay, so my first question. And then I know you've written about the Scotch Gambit as well, but first of all, What do people misunderstand about the French exchange? And then I'd like to talk more about the structure of the book, which I found interesting.
Sure. So, well, first of all, the French exchange is, I would say it's not just an opening, it's well, you could say it's a lifestyle, but no, but it's really like, okay, you trade pawns and move 3, but then more things happen, right? There are more pawns that get traded. And usually what happens is somebody gets an isolated pawn. A lot of times white gets an isolated pawn. So the position you get is not going to be a drawish position with the symmetrical position. It's going to be an isolated pawn position, which is similar to what you might get in a Queen's Gambit accepted. In fact, it actually transposes to Queen's Gambit accepted in several lines, as you probably saw. So that's one thing. It's not most of the positions you get are not actually symmetrical positions. There's some there's some kind of dynamic going on.
Yeah.
Right. Those positions that are symmetrical, okay, with few exceptions, black is going to be in trouble because that symmetry, white's going to have not just an extra tempo, but the ability to put the bishop on a better square. And I've won many of those positions against stronger or weaker players, just by having the extra tempo. I mean, it's sort of like the Petrov defense. It's very similar in the structure. A lot of positions you get are similar to what you get in the Petrov defense. Well, black doesn't always play the Petrov defense and thinks that they can just make a draw, right? The Petrov defense is an opening where a lot of things can happen. So, I devote a whole chapter to that thing I call the IQP light, where you kind of have an isolated pawn, but the difference is that the opponent's pawn is not on the E file, but on the C file. Makes a difference because your endgame prospects are better. You have the C5 square for the knight outpost. The attacking prospects for the bishop on C4, it's open. The F7 square is right immediately under attack, whereas the E6 pawn is not there. So there's a lot of ideas there. I think that people should read the book even if they don't want to play the opening, because it teaches you a lot about strategy, just about chess in general. That's what I was trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And that gets to my questions about the structure, which I did enjoy. And, obviously I've read my share of opening books, and I found it unique in that, like, you show sort of like, you start with like an anti-example and then you start conceptually and then only give the concrete lines at the end. So how did you decide to arrange the book that way?
That's just the way I think. It doesn't necessarily work in every opening, but from a very young age, they told me that you're supposed to learn the concepts and not the lines. I mean, I don't remember ever like actually memorizing lines, maybe just cramming them before a game where I already had them worked out. But memorization to me is like, that's not why I play chess, right? I don't like that. And I don't think you need to do that. And I think the exchange French is an opening where you just have to understand the concepts. You don't actually have to memorize a lot of the lines. There's a couple of exceptions maybe, but it's more conceptually than that. So that's how I think about it. I don't, that's how I was learned to think from the beginning. I think the Scotch Gambit is also arranged that way. I don't like openings where you have to memorize 25 game moves of theory. If you're going to make a mistake on move 23, you lose. Yeah. It's just not for me. Could be for others, but.
And obviously you've seen your son Mitch climb up the ranks. I'm curious what advice you've given him and how you see someone from his generation. He's a college student, correct?
Yeah.
How you see someone from his generation approaching openings.
Well, so in terms of openings, right, I think that once you get to a certain level, like if you're like 15, 1600, 1700, you can just get away with kind of approximate ideas. Once you're at a master level, you got to have your repertoire. Like I have in the end of the book, I have that repertoire file kind of like, it's almost like a database.
Yeah, like it should be a PGN. Like it's everything but a PGN.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I made it a PGN, obviously, but you got to have that, and you got to have, end games are still very important. I think most important, and I should talk about some of the end game.
Oh, right, yeah,
as well. But the openings, I never consider myself an opening specialist, but when you come down to it, my style in the opening has been, you got to be solid. Don't play openings that you don't remember. If you don't remember an opening, find a sideline, which is reasonable. If you're white, it shouldn't be that hard to do that. If you're black, it could be a little harder, but if you play an opening you don't remember and there's theory there, you don't know it, you're going to be in trouble against stronger players. And frankly, you're not going to learn anything because you're going to lose out of the opening or you're going to get a bad position. So openings are important at a certain level. So Mitch is actually working more on openings now than he did before. But I think until a certain level, until like 2000 or something, it's much more important to learn the end game. It's much more important to. So I think the most important thing in chess is to have the passion for it, to enjoy it. If you're not enjoying your work, if you're not enjoying your chess study, you're not going to improve because you're not going to be motivated and you're not going to see that as a positive experience. So for me, different people find enjoyment from different things. Some people like wild attacks. Some people like combinations. I do too. For me, the end game has always been like the end game studies where, a knight is stronger than a queen or a bishop, let's say, is stronger than a queen or something like that, right? Material, energy over matter, things like that arouse certain emotion, certain, excitement, and make things interesting. So for me, that's been one of the things that makes chess interesting for me. And so for me, endgame study was never a chore. It was always something that I look forward to.
And you're getting deep in the weeds working on Dvoretsky's manual with Karsten Muller.
Yeah. So actually the Dvoretsky work, I mean, I also should mention that I'm, and one of the ways I got into that project is I was writing a column. I'm still writing a column every issue for the American Chess magazine. You're probably familiar with the magazine.
Yes.
I write an endgame column for them, which is very interesting for me to write because I always find new things there, and it's extremely fascinating to go over these endgames from the past, and maybe not even so much distant past, like even like Fischer-Spassky, that era, and then going through them with a modern approach, with modern computer. Like most people probably don't know that the famous 10th game of Fischer-Spassky, which was widely considered one of his best games at Ruy Lopez, there were 5 consecutive errors there, 2 by Fischer, 3 by Spassky, between half moves from 38 to 40. So Fischer misses a win, Spassky misses a draw, Fischer misses a win, Spassky makes a mistake. It's a draw, Fischer, a loss, and then Fischer misses the win, 5 in a row. It's really interesting to see how endgame theory and endgame practice has changed, and our understanding of the endgame has changed, and it's so much better now. So I learned a lot about endgames recently, and I think Hannon felt that it would be for that reason, and also because I had known Mark Dvoretsky personally. We speak the same language. He wrote his book in Russian, and it'll be easier for me to understand what he meant, because a lot of times, like, all these variations that he gives, right? He says certain things, but when you kind of know the language, you know the person, you have a better idea what he meant. So my job was, Karsten Muller is certainly the world's foremost endgame specialist, far, far above me, but and he did a lot of work to find mistakes in the original Dem 4, the 4th edition. So he found many mistakes and he corrected them. I found some more mistakes and corrected them, but he did like 95% of that work. And then my contribution was to kind of put the whole product, which had changed considerably because there's some new theory, some new theoretical positions and rook endings, which you hadn't had, completely revised annotations to some games, like the famous Rubinstein game got totally new annotations. And my task was to put it into language the way that Dvoretsky would have done it, right? And I think that mix worked out really well, with like Karsten working on the physics, so to speak, and I'm kind of more the lyrical expert.
Sounds fun, yeah.
So that I think that mix worked out really well, and I think it came out. It's a fundamental work. It's really good. And then we worked. We people kind of thought, well, this is getting really big. There's so much theory now. Maybe it's better to make kind of a light version. Somebody came up with an idea of, let's make a kind of fast track version. So we did that as well. So now there's like a shorter version, which I call it like the tournament version. I take it to tournaments all the thing, because it fits in a little, notebook kind of thing. You don't even have to take a suitcase or anything, right? It fits in. It's really, really short. So I bring that. I always bring a copy of some Dvoretsky book to tournaments, just as karma, because you gotta have that. And actually, I should mention that I'm now working with Karsten on another book, another endgame book, an endgame exercise book, which we're working on now. I'm writing. We're kind of jointly writing it. It's a good project, and it's an exciting project, and it will probably be published next year. Although I'm not gonna guarantee that, but it's probably sometime next year it'll be published.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, something to look forward to for sure. So just a couple more questions, Alex. This has been amazing. Number one, what's your tournament schedule? What do you have coming up?
Sure. So I played in Norway next week. To 2 weeks from now, I'm playing in Washington International.
Oh, fun!
With
DC,
Mitch.
Yeah.
Mitch is going to go back to school then. He's with me, for the summer. I'm probably going to play in either the New Jersey Open or the New York State or something on Labor Day, somewhere there. Part of it is that I have to come to the city about once every 2 months for work. As you mentioned, I live in Tennessee. I'm working remotely. So kind of the arrangement I have is I kind of come back and spend a couple of weeks, or spend a week every couple of months in New York. I try to combine that with chess tournaments. So I'm going to play in the Washington International, then probably something on Labor Day. Coming back, Tennessee Open again. I'm playing the U.S. Masters this year again at the end of November, where I did really well last year. I hope to repeat that. I'm playing in a FIDE tournament in Indianapolis in September. So I have a pretty busy schedule with chess.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to fit the book writing too.
I don't know how you do it all already, but that sounds great.
I have no idea.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to miss you at all those events, despite even the New Jersey Open is an hour from me, but I'll be.
Well, tell me where you'll be, and maybe I'll try to make it.
We'll link up for sure sooner or later. Yeah. And out of curiosity, Alex, why did you move to Tennessee?
Oh, that was more of a kind of family decision. But we wanted to move out of the East Coast for a while, and it just so happened that, just for mostly for family reasons, just kind of happened that way.
Gotcha.
But okay. Still getting settled, but it's good.
And my last question, I think, Alex, I mean, you've told some amazing stories about Korchnoi and Tal, and obviously your simul with Kasparov. Have we left any on the cutting room floor? Are there any sort of like similar?
Well, actually, I do want to mention one topic that is kind of very front and center in everybody's mind, because I think I have an opinion there which might be interesting.
I think I saw your Facebook post about this. If this is what I think, okay, go ahead.
Right. So Magnus Carlsen, right? So what he did, first of all, is unprecedented. You can't compare it to what Kasparov did in '93, because he didn't refuse to play the match. He just decided to play not for FIDE. That's different than Carlsen saying, I don't want to play the match. Mm-hmm. He didn't say, oh yeah, I'll play the match, but it's not FIDE, I'll play. No, that's not what he said. Right? It's also very different from Bobby Fischer. You can't compare it to that. Bobby Fischer just quit. Carlsen is not quitting. On the other hand, I don't think he owes the chess world anything.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair to like expect him to do it. And I think it's fair to say that these two world championship, a world championship match every 2 years is too much.
Mm-hmm. I
think it's fair to say. But I think he's making a mistake in spite of that. And here's why. So I think that, he's playing Nepo, right? He was playing Nepo. He beat him easily last time. It wouldn't be so easy this time. He'd have to prepare. But I think that people will perceive this as him basically not being sure that he can do it. And not being sure in his ability to continue defending his title every time. That there's at least a little bit of thought of that. Like if he thought that he would beat him with 100%, he beat him by 4 points last time. Why should he be worried playing him this time? If he thought that there was 100% chance he would win, I think he would play. I think people would perceive it that way. And why is that important? Because I think people will play better against him now.
Yeah, I could see the second.
A lot of it is psychology. Psychology is so much in chess. You hear like the rating. Like, why do people concerned about their ratings? It's not just for status. It's because if you're sitting at the board with a higher rating, you're more intimidating to your opponent. For example, Ilya Nizhnik recently won 2 tournaments with a 9-0 score. You don't think his rating has something to do with the fact he's 2,700? His opponents are 2,400? You don't think they come into the game thinking that they're already a victim in the beginning? Now, Carlsen's opponents are saying, he might be worried. He's not super gut anymore.
Yeah, I'm not so sure.
And they're going to start, that's my opinion, and they're going to start playing better. They're going to start playing better, and he's not going to have as big, he's going to come closer to the pack. And I think that my prediction is in 2 years, he's not going to be number one.
Yeah.
Ranked.
I would take the other side of that, but obviously with full,
I think most people would.
With full respect for your opinion. Yeah. And one thing I would just mention is I think that it's true that maybe it reflects a shred of doubt about, his prospects in a prospective rematch with Nepo. Right. But I think that's only because he doesn't want to do the work. Like, I think he thinks he can't just show up and win, or at least he would be at greater risk if he doesn't do the work.
But you got to do the work. You always have to do the work in chess.
But I don't know.
Preparing for any tournament, if you're playing 10 different people, are you doing less work than you're doing for one person?
I don't think so. From what the Peter Hein Nielsens of the world say, I think that you do less work for getting ready for Tata Steel than you do, or at least different work than you do for getting ready for a world championship match.
Well, because it's less important.
Yeah, and you can be more creative. Okay. You can.
So there you go. So he's not prepared to play an important. Anyway, I know it's an outside. I know it's a. What's the word? Not the most. Yeah, not the most popular. Not the most common opinion. But at least I've said it, and time will tell.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll know for sure.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, and certainly, I mean, it could be like he obviously has an amazing life. So
yes.
And
I don't blame him. I just think he's making a mistake. I think he's doing what he thinks is right, and I don't blame him at all. I mean, I understand. I can understand where he's coming from. I just think it's a mistake.
Yeah. And for posterity, by the way, we should say we're recording this on July 29th. So anything that happens with Magnus in the Olympiad,
exactly.
He today was round 1 and he didn't play. So we don't, the story will start to be written even tomorrow, but,
well, it'll be a long story, I'm sure.
Yes, it will. Well, Alex, this has been amazing. Some awesome stories. And I know, I'm glad that you're so active, because I mean, sooner or later I will get to say hi to you, in a tournament in person.
Yeah.
And for listeners who would like to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can look me up on Facebook. I have an email account, afish@panics.com, which is public. You can go to I have a website, which people don't really use that much, but it's out there. People can reach me at, it's public. I don't have a problem with that. I go on Facebook sometimes.
Okay, excellent. Well, good luck to you and Mitch in the upcoming tournaments.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. It was quite exciting to be on, and I'm happy to be part of it.
Thanks to everyone who helps make Perpetual Chess possible.
Big shout out to my producer, Matthew Passy. I'd also like to thank the Blue Wire Podcast Network, with whom we are proud to be affiliated. Be sure to follow us on social media, Beneficial1 on Twitter, at Perpetual Chess on Instagram, or you can join the Perpetual Chess Facebook group. You can email me, ben@perpetualchesspod.com. And of course, last but not least, I'd like to give major thanks to the Perpetual Chess Patreon and PayPal supporters. Those who choose to join that community based on their level of support can do things like submit questions for guests of the show, have access to live Zoom Q&A lectures with grandmasters who often have appeared on the show, going over chess games, answering questions, stuff like that. And you can even get access to ad-free Perpetual Chess if that's your preference. But most of all, thanks to everyone for listening, and we will catch you all on the next episode.